I'm full-fledged Canadian.
Larry?
Canadian in every way. Appropriate.
I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce you to the lunch break. My name is Roger Garland. I'm on the committee, and I'll be saying grace of the day. Can't hear? Sorry about that. Technical difficulty. Blame it on me. To start off, I enjoyed Mr. Duncan's talk about the pump shop, because I used to work for a pump facility, and there'll be a road map outside if you want to find a pump shop anytime in the near future. To start, I'd like to introduce the head table, if I may. To my left, we have Lisa Hollett, who's a co-chairperson. We have Peter Green from the Canadian Manufacturers Association, and Bill Daw from Air Canada, who's our corporate sponsor for today's event. On my right, we have Catherine Parsons, who's the chairperson, Dr. Rick Raskin, Dean, Faculty of Business Administration, Dr. Lanita Carter, Associate Dean of External Affairs, and Paul Burke, also a co-chairperson. And now I'd like to take this brief opportunity to say a really quick grace so you could all eat. Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts, which we are about to receive from thy bounty, through Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy your meal. Wasn't too bad.
Mr. Peter Green is President and Chief Executive Officer of Alcatel Canada Wire, which is one of the largest companies of its kind in Canada. Before joining Alcatel, Mr. Green held numerous positions in a variety of industries, including food and beverage, wine production, management consulting, and accounting. Aside from his responsibilities at Alcatel, Mr. Green is also chairman of the Canadian Manufacturers Association. Amazingly, Mr. Green also finds time to support the North American Wildlife Foundation and the Patrons for Outward Bound Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mr. Peter Green.
Well, thank you very much, Lisa, for that very kind introduction. It's a great pleasure to be here, made even greater by the fact that I didn't know I was going to be speaking to a bunch of young folk. I thought I was going to be put up, as usual, in front of a bunch of fuddy-duddy businessmen. And this creates quite a change for me. It means I've got to change my script somewhat, not in content, but in style. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. Let's see how we go on. I'll judge that by your reactions as we go through this. But it is a great pleasure, because what I'm going to say is not going to be new to anybody. I don't have any great revelations about business in Canada or in the rest of the world. I know nothing about what is happening in business that you folk don't know. I guess I spend my life surviving or not surviving according to what is happening in business, which is something that many of you have yet to face. So I may bring a perspective, but that as yet you haven't experienced. But I do warn you in advance that nothing I'm going to say today is going to send you out of here shouting, "Eureka! We have a new insight or a new perspective or, heaven forbid, a solution." With that little caveat, that little warning, I'm going to launch. And I'm told we have until 2:30. Which I don't think I'm going to take that much time, but when I get going, particularly if I depart from the script, I may take a little longer than the 20 minutes or so I had in mind. And that will depend upon the degree of interest I see. So if you think you've had enough, the odd snore from the back will fix it. You'll find I can wind up pretty darn quickly. You know, we're in a period of enormous change. Everybody knows that. And it's sending some businessmen into the kind of frenzy and into a kind of philosophical mode, a state of mind that I find pretty negative. The notion of protectionism, the notion that when a company gets in trouble, it should somehow be bailed out, should look to others to bail it out, is quite alien to my philosophy, totally, totally alien. And it reminded me, as did seeing your faces as I walked in here, of a joke which might get this little presentation off to the right start today. And it's to do with a class of school kids in the United States. And one Friday afternoon, the teacher decided to test the general knowledge of these kids. So she said, now, the first right answer to this question, the first kid to answer correctly gets Monday off. And she said, I want you to tell me who said this. Think not what you can do, your country can do for you, think what you can do for your country. And a little hand at the back went up, a little Japanese kid. And he said, that was John F. Kennedy, ma'am. She said, beautiful, take Monday off. No, couldn't do that. You see, I need to be here Monday and every day to study very assiduously because one day I'm going to be the chairman of a major Japanese corporation. So thanks very much, but I'll be here Monday morning. So she said to herself, well, let's try it again. She said, okay, I'll give you another question. Who said this? I have a dream. A little Japanese hand went up at the back of the class. Martin Luther King, ma'am. She says, right, take Monday off. No, he says, I can't do that. He says, I have a career cut out for me as a very famous Japanese electronics engineer one day, and for that I have to get good grades and study very assiduously, so I'll be here Monday morning. And just then, a little voice from the back of the class said, God damn Japanese. She said, who said that? Little hand went up. Lee Iacocca, Mom, see you Tuesday. Now, that may be the last bit of levity we have in this presentation because speaking as a manufacturer, I got a lot of stuff to say that isn't funny right now. Not profound, maybe, but certainly not funny. You know, we enter this new year with no clear indication that a recovery for manufacturing is underway, despite what StatsCan recently said. There may be a technical recovery, but most of us are still downsizing. Most of us are still working day to day just to stay ahead of the game, indeed just to survive. And the past year was a particularly rough one for Canadian manufacturers. In our sector of the economy, we lost about 1,200 manufacturing companies who went bankrupt or left the country. Some 84,000 jobs have been lost, 2,500, I believe, here in Newfoundland. And this isn't a funny situation. Our CMA analysis for 1993 indicates that recovery is indeed going to be slow and painful and mean. And manufacturers are going to continue to strive to meet the challenge to become more competitive. We have to build the necessary structures to prosper not only domestically but in export too. That actually is one of the bright spots that many people don't recognize. Canadian manufactured exports have been developing very well and increasing year by year. It's the domestic sector of our economy that's giving us real difficulty. Competing today, though, is what the Canadian Manufacturers Association is all about. That's really why, that's our raison d'etre, as a matter of fact. That's why we're here, is to help manufacturers in this country understand the issues of competition. And we began that process in a really tangible way in, about 4 years ago, 1989, as a matter of fact, when we introduced our paper, which we called The Aggressive Economy, Daring to Compete. Some of you may have seen that paper. Those who haven't, I would certainly recommend to have a look at it, because although I say it as shouldn't, I think it's a very fine blueprint for Canadian or any other business, as a matter of fact, in terms of competing with the situation that we now really face ourselves within this this globalized industrial world in which we all live. That paper was the first of a generation of the series of papers of that kind on competitiveness that have been published in Canada during recent years. And we followed it in 1990 with the publication of what we called Canada's Competitiveness Index. We now publish that annually. And that tracks our competitiveness according to a number of indices, number of criteria that we've decided are important against other industrial nations, advanced industrial nations. In June this last year, we launched our sequel to The Aggressive Economy. We called it, believe it or not, The Aggressive Economy, but this time Competing to Win. We'd gone beyond the blueprint. We'd gone to a more prescriptive document which helped describe how one competes to win. And that's received accolades. And I must say it's been read very, very widely, at least at the federal government level. I've sent a lot of copies to Bob Ray, but I'm not sure he's got into it in any depth as yet. We followed that in October with Yet another paper, we call it another product, not a paper, we call it the CMA Competitiveness Test for Government Action. And this is a software package which is pretty cheap, which you can use on pretty well. It's designed on Windows at the moment, but it's coming on DOS very quickly, or I think may even be on DOS now. You can just plug it in, and you can test any prospective or current government legislation according to a number of criteria in a very logical manner. And at the end of it, you have a scorecard. And the scorecard says to you whether it aids competitiveness of industry or whether it hinders competitiveness. If it aids it, you're encouraged to write to the government and tell them. And if it doesn't, you're encouraged to do that as well. Not only that, this software will print the letter for you. And it's a very eloquent letter. I tell you, this software is a whole lot more interesting and more exciting than Nintendo. I've shown it to Michael Wilson, who liked it, believe it or not, and his department have ordered 1,000 of them. So we may be getting there. Whether they'll get used, I don't know. Now, the aggressive economy, this major paper of ours, Competing to Win, as we call it, as we subtitle it, is really an economic agenda for Canada. It's one which charts the course that Canadians have to take if we're going to survive economically in really the most competitive environment that any of us, certainly in my business career, which is now quite long, any of us have really encountered. And the recommendations we make are based on a single objective, and that's to ensure that conditions are created here in Canada that will allow manufacturers to become globally competitive. And we describe to manufacturers some of the fundamentals that they themselves must confront if they are to succeed in an increasingly competitive world. And I say that they must confront because I have to tell you that one of the basic philosophical tenets of the Canadian Manufacturers Association is self-help. It is not a question of blaming governments for all our ills. Now, don't get me wrong, I do my share of criticizing governments, but only after one has confronted one's own problems and put them right in a professional manner. I'm afraid not enough manufacturers take that view. That's a personal view, not a CMA official view, but I strongly believe it. A strong manufacturing sector, however, is important. And why is that important? You may see statistics that will tell you that employment in direct manufacturing or the contribution, direct contribution of manufacturing to the Canadian economy is about 17%. Well, that may be true. And indeed, employment in manufacturing has diminished over the years consistently. But what we find when we look at things in a more accurate and global way is the services that are directly linked to manufacturing and which would disappear without that manufacturing base, together with direct manufacturing, add up to 52% of our economy. In other words, a strong, thriving manufacturing base for the Canadian economy is absolutely vital if we're going to continue to enjoy the standard of living that most of us have become used to and hope to continue. What I'm going to say here now you've heard before, but I make no apologies for that because it has to be said and said and said again until the message is truly internalized. And I hope I don't sound patronizing when I say that. I don't intend to be. I just have I have a thick enough skin to get up and say the same thing time and time again. And one day, a critical mass of people may well accept and decide to implement the rules necessary to create a truly prosperous Canada as we move towards the end of this decade and into the next century. We, as manufacturers, as you know, are competing in a whirlwind of global economic change. We're competing in a world where goods and services and money and people, information, ideas are moving more freely and more rapidly than ever before. We are competing to win. We are competing in a world in which the rules have changed. And I, as an Englishman, born and raised in England, remember the story, I lived right through it, of English soccer. You know, I remember as a boy that nobody beat England, or very rarely. We thought we were the tops at soccer. We invented the game, and heck, we got to be the best at it. And we were pretty good at it. And then, you know, the Italians started to beat us, and the Brazilians beat us. And you know what we said? Gee, but they're not playing the right game. They pull shirts, they trip you up. And instead of saying, just a minute, maybe these guys have learned to play this game a different way. All we did was say, well, we're the best. We invented the game. These are the rules. You know, you have 5 forwards, 3 midfielders, and two defensemen and a goalie. Don't you? Well, no. The Brazilians came along, and shoot, they had 3 at the front and 5 at the back, and sweepers and all terms we didn't know about. It took 25 years for the Brits to realize that the game had changed. We lost year in, year out to these folk who didn't play the game by the right rules, the old rules. The old rules don't apply. And as you well know, the old rules will never again apply. Indeed, the new rules will become old rules within a year or two of having been initiated. That is the name of the game today. And I've been stimulated quite often by my observations regarding English soccer. I tell you, my personal view is that they haven't even learned yet, because we still find them playing the same old rigid game. That is a lesson for all manufacturers, all business, everywhere in the world, but it is certainly absolutely appropriate to where we are in Canada today. We are in a highly competitive game which you play to win. You win or you lose, and if you lose, your standard of living inevitably starts to decline. You've got to win your share of games. In fact, you've got to win most of the home games and a fair share of the away games, which is why we need a strong domestic industry, servicing our domestic needs, and that's deteriorated over the years. I believe the figures, I may be wrong here roughly, but I'm right in the right ballpark. Canadian manufacturing serviced about 73–75% of domestic needs in about 1981–82. Today, it's down to the low 50s. Imports are servicing a lot more. Now, counter to that, we're gaining more and more exports. So it's not all a bad situation. There's a light and a dark here. There are two sides of the coin. But we simply have to be strong at home in order to succeed and win as many away games as we can. The fact of the matter is, in thinking of away games, we have no choice but to think globally today. And I meet many manufacturers, small business people who say, well, that's not of any interest to me because I have no intention of operating outside Canada. You know, I operate in Kitchener and I service a 100-mile radius and that's all that matters. Until one day, an American company or a European or Japanese company suddenly appears on TV selling that very same product that you thought was ensconced in this little area of yours, cheaper and better. We have to think globally. We have to accept the international aspect of the economy and of business today at all levels in industry. What we've got to do, in my view, and we say it in our aggressive economy document, is somehow recapture that spirit of adventure, that spirit of future building that so obviously was alive and well in Canada years ago. In any young, growing country, this spirit of adventure, this maybe pioneering spirit, is really what creates the future. And that's a big problem for us, because going through a time of massive transformation always leads one to wonder, to challenge one's belief in oneself. And moving from an economy that has been natural resource based, selling most of those resources in a relatively crude form to the United States, to one in which we have to learn efficiently to add value in competition with some very aggressive advanced societies. That transformation is very difficult. It requires a paradigm shift. And any big change is uncomfortable. It shakes you up. We are shaken up as a nation right now. And of course, it's not helped by the fact that many people feel deeply insecure because they've got no job. And many more will have no job. So how we attack this, I don't know, except by people like me getting up on my hind legs every week and suggesting that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And it's people like you and like me who are going to create that difference. It won't happen unless you and I make it happen. Cutting out the heavy stuff here. Well, it's not. I didn't write this stuff actually, and some of it isn't the way I talk anyhow. So I'm trying to paraphrase quickly. Okay. Well, now, let's get into some of the fundamentals of this great paper of ours, this seminal work of ours. We talk about the concept of developing a winning economy. And how do you do that? Well, we've decided that there are several fundamentals. We call them, in fact, the 4 pillars of a competitive, aggressive society or aggressive economy. The first one we identify is total quality management. Second one is a highly educated and skilled workforce. The effective development and application of new technology. And lastly, and this is where, unfortunately, I have to speak about the government, we talk about a public environment that promotes industrial growth and competitiveness, an environment. And I'll talk a little bit about that towards the end of these remarks. Now, we can establish these 4 fundamentals of a prosperous economy here in Canada if we understand that it's basic to our future standard of living to do so. You know, they say about the Brits that they never see the handwriting on the wall until their backs are to it. And maybe that's so with all of us. We are made that way. Maybe we don't recognize that our backs are to the wall. If we did, we would start to do things. Marvelous things happen when you find yourself in a corner and nowhere to go but out. This aggressive economy of ours is based on the conviction that wealth creation and our future economic prosperity depend, and I make no apologies for this, upon a strong manufacturing center. Our goods-producing sector, including primary industries, but made up mostly of manufacturers, drives, as I said earlier, about 52% of the Canadian economy's total output. Not too many people realize this when they talk about Canada as a service economy. We can't sell hamburgers to each other. At least we can't survive on that. Somebody's got to make the darn things. Most Canadian business, of the Canadian businesses that are exposed to international competition, who trade internationally, happen to be manufacturers. And it's here that the battle is going to be won or it's going to be lost. Now, how do we go about becoming world competitive then? How do we go about implementing these 4 fundamentals, 4 pillars of this so-called aggressive economy? The top of my list was total quality management or total quality commitment. That really is where we as business people can have the most impact, in my view, individually. In a market economy like Canada, our only hope for increasing global competitiveness is to improve quality and productivity, right here in our own companies. Traditionally, we've relied upon the export of our abundant raw materials for our high standard of living. And we have been able to prosper behind tariff barriers in a very protected environment, as manufacturers, that is. And we've managed, therefore, with less, in general, with certain clear exceptions, but in general, with less than world standards of efficiency. And those rules have changed, and they've changed very quickly, partly as a result of free trade, partly as a result of the inevitable globalization of economies that's now happening. We simply, as manufacturers, have to focus upon international standards of competitiveness, of quality, of efficiency, of productivity. Many of our members have confronted this change with a lot of vigor, great energy, but some simply haven't caught on yet. Why? I don't know, because the evidence is there to be seen. We've got, in other words, to streamline dramatically, and many companies are doing that. We have to simplify procedures, reduce bureaucracies, take massive amounts of overhead out of our businesses. We have to speed up decisions and turnaround times. We have to become remarkably more flexible than we've been in the past. We have to learn to adapt to change, a level of change that we haven't ever confronted before. We have to design and develop new products that meet and exceed international standards of quality and service. We have to invest in, and more importantly, or as importantly, manage technology as a competitive weapon. And there's quite a skill in that. It takes a certain mindset. We have to train people, and we have to take a responsibility as manufacturers to train people and not leave it to the government or the educational institutions in our society, important though both those institutions are. We have to invest, and invest heavily, in state-of-the-art equipment at a time when very few manufacturers have got a lot of money to spend. They've got to find some way of doing this. And we have to enlist the cooperation of workers at all levels, workers who are prepared to become involved in decision-making process, but, as importantly, become prepared to accept the responsibility for end results. That's a tough thing to do in any traditional business. I say that from hard experience. We have to forge new relationships with suppliers and customers that will boost efficiency, that will look for strategic and synergistic solutions to problems. It sounds like a lot to do. It is. But there isn't really a shortcut. There is no way of fast-tracking this, in my view. How many of us have really confronted this? How many of us as manufacturers have truly grasped that nettle? In my view, not nearly enough. Now, the second pillar of our aggressive economy is a competitive workforce, a highly skilled, highly educated workforce. And that, of course, speaks directly to this audience. We've been trying for years to get the message out that we are shifting quickly to a knowledge-based and a knowledge-intensive economy. We've talked about the high technology content of goods. We've talked about productivity and the need to think on your feet and to confront change. But I don't think we've taken it seriously enough as a society. If we had, we'd be yelling blue murder about the high school dropout rate. At 30%, it's one of the highest in the world. And the implications of that kind of failure for our future standard of living are quite enormous. It's a tragedy in the making, in my view. We are told that 20% of our working age population is functionally illiterate. And that doesn't speak just to people who arrive on our shores from places like Ethiopia with no education and no English. This actually applies also to young folk trained right here in Canada. An even greater number, we're told, are functionally innumerate. And much of my company's training goes to teaching people basic math and basic English so that they, on the shop floor, can actually input information and deal with information on the PCs with which they have to work today and the various monitors. And despite our spending on education, which at 7.4% of GDP is apparently the highest amongst the G7 countries, we don't seem to be producing enough people capable of dealing with tomorrow's challenges. Now, the evidence facing us in this sense is really overwhelming. And what I've just said might seem critical of the educational system. I don't really mean that because I don't have the basis upon which to criticize the system. I do, however, criticize the results or point up the results. And I ask myself, whose fault is this? Well, I don't know. It's not necessarily the fault of any one institution or sector of society. Perhaps it's our fault altogether, our fault as a society. Perhaps we just haven't asked for what we really need as a society and insisted upon it. You know, we are thinking radically in industry, in manufacturing, about change and about how to create the quality required to survive. We've had to approach that issue from a life or death point of view, because if you don't make money, you go out of business. And if you don't make money, I lose my job very quickly, as recent history of CEOs will indicate very, very eloquently. So maybe that galvanizes you. Maybe as society, because it's more intangible and more long-term, we haven't understood the tragedy in the making through not keeping up with international standards of education. And we don't have a choice but to fix this. If I speak now as I would speak to this bunch of fuddy-duddies I normally speak to, if we want our kids to lead fulfilling lives, we'll tackle this one right now. It's as serious as that. And I have 3 kids about your age, so for me this is a big emotional issue. The education challenge demands our best efforts. The skills of all our people are the single most important competitive tool we could have. If we don't get it right, it could be our single greatest competitive disadvantage. We have to take a personal interest in the institutions that train our people. We must consider it our problem, not somebody else's. It is not the government's problem solely. It is our problem. We have to invest in education on a strategic basis if we're to consider education as part of the infrastructure that promotes economic growth. What about total quality management, total quality commitment as applied to education. Why not? Why should we, poor manufacturers, be the only ones who get into total quality? It's a very important issue, and one that I discussed just the other night with a number of deputy ministers, and the next day with a couple of cabinet ministers. And they didn't actually get under the table. They sort of sat there and took it. Maybe they're going to think about this. A third pillar of the aggressive economy, as we've identified, is the application development of new technology. And that requires in money, it requires more than money, it requires a state of mind. A leap of faith, perhaps, because investment in technology is very often a leap of faith, as the development of technology is very much a question of belief and hanging in by your fingernails. Using technology as a competitive tool is no simple matter either. Technology is not just buying the latest stuff. It's having people there who can use that latest stuff with imagination and creatively. Creative intelligence brought to the latest technology is where it's at. And our future depends, in my view, upon not just the acquisition, development of technology, but upon the creative use of that, technology by bright, imaginative, enthusiastic Canadians, many of whom exist. And I'll give a little plug here for my own company, because I hear so often that Canadians cannot develop technology, that somehow we are slow and we can't keep up with the rest of the world. And to some extent, that's true. I mean, lordy me, compared with the Japanese, we're a long way behind. But there are some real bright spots. Years ago, I was at an exhibition down in San Francisco, and we had a booth there, and there was a young fellow, about 28 years old, young Greek guy who worked for us. And I knew he worked for us, but he was just a face. I didn't know his name, and I've forgotten it now. And he had a little box of tricks in front of him, just a box with wires coming out. And I said, well, what's this? And he said, well, this is, I won't tell you the name of the product then. Well, it was called HubNet, which means nothing. It was actually part of a technology for linking high-capacity computers together. And it's very embryonic. I tell you, there was string around it and wires. And he started to tell me about it. And I said to myself, that sounds like the kind of thing that we should be into. Now, our major business in those days was making electrical cables and wires. And our name today would suggest that's what we do. Today, that's only part of our business. So I got into this thing, and I got captured by it. And I found, within 3 months, 40 engineers to work on this from outside the company. And I had to go far afield. There weren't 40 of these people readily available to me in Canada. So I've got Japanese and Chinese, and I've got the League of Nations in there. In fact, believe it or not, I took the lady chess champion from Russia. I didn't know she was that then, because she was an electronics person too. But I put all these folk together, and they created this technology. Now, I had to hang on like this to get the funding for it. We funded it ourselves. It was tough going. Today, we are writing the world standard for what is known as fiber channel, which is going to be the next generation of local area networks, operating it up to 1 gigabit, which will link high-intensive computational facilities together. That's Canadian technology developed right here in Canada, and it's going to become the world standard in that particular field, a growing field, by the way. It can be done, and it is done. And I give you that story, although I like telling that, but I give you that story to prove that these things are happening in Canada. And belief in ourselves is perhaps the single most important thing we need right now, and particularly people of your age who are just coming into the workforce, as it were. A belief in our capability is perhaps the greatest asset we can have. The fourth, I won't talk about R&D spending and government involvement, which I had down here, because time is passing and it's not very much fun anyhow. But the fourth pillar of our aggressive economy is the one you're going to like best. It's called competitive government. Now, I gave a speech a couple of years ago in Mexico, and it was a time when the Mexicans were very, very interested in NAFTA. And I went down there to talk to them about NAFTA. And I raised this notion of competitive government. And I had on the head table with me, we had a number of Mexican government ministers. Well, when I started to talk about competitive government, people got up and started applauding. not the ministers, of course, because they'd never heard of this concept. What do you mean competitive government? And I've been criticized a great deal in recent years for saying this, because the government said, we're not in competition with anybody. But of course they are. In terms of the environment they create, an environment conducive to wealth creation, of course we compete. If our environment is not as conducive to wealth creation as the environment in France or in Japan or in Germany or wherever, we are at a basic disadvantage. So it's pretty important that we think of competitive government in that sense. I don't mean it, obviously, in the sense that government on a national basis may compete for territory, for whatever. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an environment. So I speak often to the government about creating an environment that's conducive to wealth creation. I also talk about total quality management, which I don't think is a bizarre idea at all for government. But what is this environment that is conducive to wealth creation? It's an environment in which, and this isn't going to be new to you, you all know this, in which we have balanced budgets, in which we have a tax regime that is a regime that encourages investment and savings. We need an environment in which we have freedom to take trade across borders. We need an efficient bureaucracy. That's not that much of a request, is it? But it seems to be a four-letter word in Ottawa particularly, and certainly right now in Ontario, an efficient bureaucracy. That's all we're saying. We need an education system that turns out young people with skills necessary to earn a living. Is that a big deal? But we ain't got it right now. At least we have big holes in it right now. We need an adequate safety net, of course, for disadvantaged members of society. I'm talking about a civilized society, certainly, but an efficient society. Would a Canadian government ever establish such an environment? Well, you have a right to be skeptical, I guess. But I believe that governments will be forced to do that before very long. I'm encouraged, for instance, by the actions of the Newfoundland government in its strategic economic plan released last year. It included a number of progressive recommendations that were aimed at improving the climate for manufacturers in this province. It includes, I'm told, a reduction in the general manufacturing and processing tax from 17.5% to 7.5%. That's a big issue, in my view. We don't often see reductions in taxes like that. But the national picture is dismal, and it remains dismal. Federal, provincial, and municipal debt is getting close to the level, in my view at least, at which the world's bankers are soon going to stop lending us money, except at exorbitant rates of interest. And when that happens, we will be forced into adopting stringent debt-reducing measures, and it's going to be painful. My problem with this issue is this, and I pose it as a question to you. Does a critical or a mass of Canadians understand that issue, that the debt problem won't go away? How many of us think of national debt, provincial, municipal debt, the way we think about our own debt? And I agree the analogy is not perfect, but you know yourself that you can reach a level of debt, even if you had a very, very generous bank manager, at which the interest costs become unacceptable. They start eating into the money you need to spend on clothes and food and all those things. You know that. I know that. So you take action accordingly. Governments don't know that. They don't know that. They seem to think that debt is a kind of academic thing, a theoretical thing, and that somebody will one day come out with a new paradigm of economics that will make debt irrelevant. You can almost hear them say this, because we have our blink. But debt is debt and will always be debt. And debt always has to be paid back. It's one of the natural laws. We're getting to the point where our debt is becoming impossible. And the reason for mentioning this today is that it directly impinges upon our wealth-creating capabilities. So if you do nothing else today for me but go out knowing and believing that debt ain't a good thing, at least debt beyond a certain level is not a good thing, then I will think my trip here has been well worthwhile. And if you ever get a chance to talk to a politician of any color, of any creed, of any province, federal, provincial, municipal, and tell them that, and keep telling them that, then I'll tell you my airfare here will have been well worth the money. So that really is about all I want to say about governments and about manufacturing, about the macro situation. I want to end, in fact, on a more local note. Based upon this notion of our country in transformation from a resource-based economy to an added value economy. Not that resources will disappear, please don't get me wrong. I don't see suddenly all our mines closing, although I must say you might consider here with the fisheries situation that the transformation is a lot more dramatic. Natural resources are here to stay, but they won't any longer themselves provide us with the standard of living that many of us come to take for granted. And this province is moving in that direction pretty dramatically, as I see it. I was told for these remarks that non-resource-based manufacturing is in Newfoundland is expected to constitute nearly 43% of total manufacturing in Newfoundland in this year, 1993. That is a very, very significant event. Admittedly, it's a relatively small sector, but it's a very significant event. And if this province can keep moving in that direction, it is an example, in my view, for the rest of the country. Investors in the 1990s will not be basing their decisions upon our natural resource endowments, but rather upon our ability as manufacturers, whether we're national or provincial, to add value, to be innovative, to increase productivity, reduce costs, and to be able to trade internationally. I'll come back now to the last point I'm going to make to you, and it's the most fun in my view, because it's the point where we've had potentially the most impact with government. I come back to our Nintendo game, to our software package, which I do, if you ever get the chance to have a look at this, and I don't know how that's going to happen, but I'll try and make it happen. You've got to try this, folks. It is the most fun ever. You take this software, you put it in, and then you look at the proposed legislation. There's a series of tests, and it's very logically done. It's very intelligently made, I must say. Well, our competitive test for government action, it's simplicity itself. And all this says is, at the end of the day, when you rate it, if the action proposed adds to the competitiveness of industry in Canada or of your sector of industry in Canada, keep it, support it vociferously. If it doesn't, dump it. That's the only test for government policy. Does it help us? Does it not help us? And again, this is not profound, is it? But how often do we speak about government activity in terms of whether it's good for the country or not good for the country? Bearing in mind that, like Stokely Carmichael, I'm defining the terms, and I'm going to win the argument as a result. The terms I define is, does it help us add value and maintain or increase our potential standard of living? If it does that, keep it. If it doesn't do that, unless there's a very good sociological reason for it, such as the necessary safety net that any civilized society needs, if it doesn't do that, dump it. Well, I tell you, Michael Wilson got 1,000 of these, and I'm told that they're going to be used. I'd like to see every financial journalist in this country have one of these, and several have already, because I think we'll get much more intelligent reporting as a result of that. So there we are, the 4 pillars of the economy. The challenges are daunting. I don't want to sound somber, but I do want to sound serious. We are facing, in my view, an historical point in this country's economy, an historical point. Many manufacturers are going through a revolution in the way they do business, in the structure of their businesses. I believe our economy is going through such a revolution for many reasons, and not least of them being globalization. And if we ever get the Uruguay round finished, GATT will play an increasingly significant role in opening us up to true competition. So it's a revolution that's happening to us. As young people coming into business and into this revolution, I wish you the best of luck. I'm encouraged, as I always am, when I look at relatively young faces, and that's getting increasingly common these days as I get a bit older. I wish you the best of luck. All I ask you to do is this. Notice, try to accept that our backs are against the wall. That's important. In debt, in terms of being able to compete. We don't play in the Junior A League anymore. We are now truly in the professional leagues. We've got to win most of our home games. We've got to win a fair share of our away games. All I can tell you to encourage you, I can just tell you this, that when your back's to the wall, great things seem to happen. So thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Green, for your thought-provoking and insightful address. We realize that you have a tight schedule today, and we're very honored to have you here even for just a couple of hours. As a token of our appreciation, we have some gifts for you.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going back Air Canada, so I hope I get a special...
University of Ottawa. He has held several private and public positions in export trade and formed his own company, DEC International, in 1987, where he was a consultant to a large number of companies, including many located in the Atlantic region. Following Mr. Dempsey will be Mr. Lee Shinkle. Mr. Shinkle is currently president of Instrumar Limited, an engineering company that specializes in the design and manufacture of contact and close proximity sensors, and AMI Offshore Incorporated, an offshore service company. Mr. Shinkle was born in St. John's and was educated in Ontario, Switzerland, and England. He lived in Quebec and Alberta prior to returning to Newfoundland in 1980. Mr. Shinkle is active in many community and business affairs in Newfoundland and was recently appointed Counselor of the National Research Council. We would like to welcome Mr. Dempsey and Mr. Shinkle to Business Day 1993. I will now call upon Mr. Dempsey to present the first address.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Wanda. It's a pleasure to be here today, and before I begin my formal remarks, I'd like to offer two comments to Dean Roskin. Basically, one is of my own initiative, and the other is on behalf of the organizing committee. So I thought we'd deal with this first before we get on to business. And the first comment I have is that given the last 2 days, I've had the pleasure of dealing with several of your students, and I must say that the theme, adding value, is demonstrated quite well with Memorial's product, its students, and I was very, very impressed with their skills. And I must say that you certainly are doing your share to add value to the economy. So congratulations. The second comment is from the organizing committee. They've asked me to thank you for agreeing to postpone their spring term papers and exams in exchange for the hard work they've done in organizing the committee. So fair is fair. I also like to borrow the metaphor, the analogy used by Peter Green over lunch in terms of the hockey team. I'm the manager for the Export Development Corporation's Halifax office, which covers the 4 Atlantic provinces. And in effect, I'm a member on a team that plays all of our games away, much like the Maple Leafs here, I understand. And we better win more than our fair share of our games away, outside of Canada, if we're going to see Canadian exporters be successful. I got some prepared text which we'll deal with and go through, and I've changed some of my remarks, again, to, I think, better suit the audience we have today. And instead of dealing in detail with complex financial structures that Canadian exporters are using to protect their position and enhance their competitiveness abroad, I thought we'd talk about some examples of, in some cases, how to do it, and others how not to do it, and maybe in that way give a better perspective. These days, it's not only Canadian exporters who are advocating the importance of exports, it's everybody in our national economy. In every sector, there's a growing awareness that the extent to which we depend on exports to maintain our high standard of living is ever increasing. There's also a growing awareness that our position in world markets is being challenged by increasing competition and concern that we will continue to enjoy the quality of life, which in fact has contributed to our high standard of living. We all recall that recent survey with the United Nations ranked Canada as the #1 place in the world to live, and I'm sure we all want to do our part to maintain and enhance that position. EDC plays a role in enhancing and maintaining that position, albeit a small and focused role with respect to supporting Canadian exporters. We're Canada's export bank, and in essence we provide exporters with loan insurance, with financing guarantees, and with direct loans to help Canadian exporters realize success abroad. In effect, what we try to do is, in very simple terms, is work on the risk return, or in this case value equation. The extent to which Canadian exporters face risks abroad but are able to minimize and manage those risks with proper financial services, everybody wins, and that's the game that we're playing today. It's also important to us because it's estimated that 1 of every 4 paychecks depends directly upon the export sector. Here in Newfoundland, exports are an important part of the economy as well. In fact, as many of you may already know, during the past year, total value of exports from Newfoundland and Labrador exceeded $1.5 billion, and were comprised mostly of fish products, newsprint, and mineral products sold in diverse markets around the world, in countries such as the United States, most of the countries in Europe, in South America, in Asia, and in Central America and Australia. And I'm also pleased to report that an increasing number of these firms are also EDC clients, so that we're working together to achieve this success in the export market. So all of us, from those of you here in Newfoundland and Labrador to those on the west coast of British Columbia, are concerned about holding on to established export markets. We're becoming increasingly concerned with Canada's exports for one key reason. The international trading environment that has prevailed since the Second World War has undergone a series of profound changes during the past decade. And therefore, Canada needs to adopt new approaches to exports if it is to continue to have the benefit of a favorable trade balance. Now, these changes include increasing our competitive position in world markets for manufacturing goods, and Peter Green has told us some of his strategies, which I think are quite revealing in terms of how his association is working towards achieving that end, and also with the export of natural resources and services, which comprise the other part of the export equation for Canadian companies. There's also increasing competition to Canadians' position in export markets arising from developing countries, and it's likely that that is where we will continue to see a significant erosion in our competitive position with respect to the success in the sale of our natural resources. Another factor that is quite significant in impacting upon the competitive position of Canadian exporters is that national boundaries, in essence, are becoming less significant. Large businesses and small businesses alike realize that we compete in a global economy. Large multinational trading blocs are emerging, and the concept of free trade is being applied to a growing extent, not just in North America with the NAFTA agreement that we're all familiar with here, but also in Europe and other parts of the world. And there is a threat for those who want to preserve and protect markets, but that also can be turned into an opportunity for those who want to realize unique new environments. It's clear that we have to move more quickly and change our direction if we are to maintain our role as a major exporting country and protect those paychecks that we depend upon for the sale of our goods and services abroad. And one of the things we have to do is to get more Canadians involved in selling their products and services abroad so that we can expand our share of those markets. If we look at the number in terms of people or companies involved in the export sector at this time, only 3 out of every 10 manufacturers are largely involved in the export trade. And Canadians are limited really to a narrow range of products, as I had mentioned earlier, focusing in terms of dollars, the largest share on the natural resource sector. But it's easy to tell exporters that they need to export more, but it's much more difficult to show them how to export abroad to be successful and to be competitive. And I thought it might be useful if we looked at some examples of how some companies are doing it the right way and some companies who haven't done it so correctly and need to change their approach to export markets. The first example I'd offer is really a company that's based in Newfoundland, a fish processor. I won't tell you the name of the company, but they are a company that are very innovative in their approach to the world market. They have taken really a global perspective, and they've looked at fish basically as what it is, a commodity. It's a means to realize and improve their value in the whole export chain. And what this company's been able to do with the assistance of the Export Development Corporation's loan insurance and receivable insurance program is in effect to sell their product into Eastern Europe and continue to realize an increase in market share in the face of the turmoil in terms of the countries and the breakup of the former Soviet Union countries in that part of the world. Now that would be an area where many companies would look at and say that the risks are too great, the uncertainty is too large, we just don't want to take a chance. But there's a company here that's taken that chance and has done quite well and able to realize a significant increase in its sales in that part of the world. I also think it's interesting if we look at really what's happened to the world, and probably the best way to put it, I saw a cartoon recently that was quite revealing. It was I think it was a Far Side or one of those types of one-block cartoons, and it showed an office setting with several people sitting behind their desks, getting up and running madly around the room, trying to put charts on walls, and it was the Rand McNally map division with their wake-up call. And they've really gotten a wake-up call because there are more countries now today than there were 2 years ago. Boundaries are changing. They've changed already and they'll change again. And in fact, I heard someone say that they're going to put out the next set of globes that they're going to manufacture. The countries are going to have Velcro backing on them. You can take this one off and put it here or replace it so it won't be obsolete. So we really are living in a very changing world. EDC is trying to be responsive and assist Canadian companies realize opportunities in this changing world. An example we might look at is what's happened when the former Soviet Union countries split apart. The first part of that process, we saw the emergence of the three Baltic states, Latvia, Estonia, and you help me with the third? Lithuania, sorry. We put in through the government's, what we call the government's Canada account, which is the vehicle that the government uses through EDC to fund export opportunities where the risks are greater than EDC could take on as a corporation itself, $10 million in each of those states. That money was there for quite some time. There were a lot of opportunities for Canadian companies who were trying to sell their products into those markets, but we didn't sign a deal. No money was taken up. It's a very simple reason. We spent some time to look further into the process, and it was as simple as the fact that in each of these states, they had not yet resolved internally their own processes in order to, in effect, execute the proper loan documents to access the funding. We did all we could as a country to respond to the opportunity, and they weren't even able at that point to do something as simple as the proper administration to make those lines of credit effective. So what that tells us is that in this world of change and this very dynamic marketplace, even simple things like proper administration are things we can't take for granted in certain parts of the world. We can also look to, for example, areas in the Gulf states. We've had several of our clients who were doing business quite successfully in that part of the world for many years, with very little financial risk that they perceived on their part. In fact, if you looked at the financial statements from several of these trading companies, and I've looked at them, they're very, very impressive. And what's quite telling is on these financial reports you'll get from international credit agencies on some of these trading houses who operate in the Gulf states, we always look for a conclusion or a credit rating. Is it 5A1? Is it AAA? What is it? The bottom of most of these reports I've seen, the conclusion is creditworthy for any amount. It doesn't narrow it down very much. What that says is the company is very strong financially. But also, there are reasons why even these firms may not be able to meet their obligations. And if a Canadian company is seeking to be successful in selling abroad, one part of the equation has to be you've got to get paid. You can sell your product, provide it to the marketplace, but if you don't get paid for it, you've gotten no value from the transaction. And in this case, we had a few clients who saw fit to have our insurance protection on those contracts. We look so first with caution, because 9 out of 10 claims that EDC pays under all of its export insurance policies are for claims in the United States of America. Sometimes we take a too simplistic approach towards the marketplace. They speak the same language. We have the same business culture. Most of us, if not all of us, have been there before. We know how they react, or at least we assume we do, and therefore we let down our guard, and we're not as careful as we should be when it comes to extending credit and accepting financial terms. So that in the case of the United States, the word that EDC offers to its clients and the prospective exporters looking to find new markets is to be careful, be prudent, and protect your position. Even traditional financial instruments that most business people would be comfortable with and familiar with, such as letters of credit, in today's market, in today's environment, can be literally not worth the paper they're printed on. I had a client come into my office last summer who had just secured a large order of fish to be sold to a company in Egypt. And he was basically coming in just to tell me that he had got the contract and things had gone ahead as he had expected. He had a letter of credit, and as far as he was concerned, he didn't need any help from EDC. He made the sale. He had done his homework, he thought. He was in my office a month later, about 2 days after the due date for the LC, because that bank, which was a subsidiary of the Bank of Cairo, no longer in existence. He didn't have anything. He had a piece of paper, and he had a contract which he fulfilled his part of, and he had no payment. It's a risky market. There are steps and precautions you can take to protect your position, and in this case, that particular exporter, I think, learned a very valuable, if not expensive, lesson. Well, enough for the moment of practical examples. Let's, if you will, bear with me, look at how EDC has done, because I think that may be telling in terms of how we've been able to support Canadian exporters in the past year in terms of our results. In 1992, our business volume, covering both insurance and financing, was just under $10 billion. And that included $833 million in the Canada account. Those are the funds that I'd mentioned earlier that the Government of Canada would provide for countries like the Baltic states, for example. This represented an increase of 38% over the previous year, and it's a part of our sustained pattern of growth to support Canadian exporters. If we look at what those dollars mean in terms of customers, there were 1,950 customers approximately, new customers for EDC last year. A lot of those are new exporters to the business. And if we look at that expressed in terms of person years of employment, it's a number of some 200,000. On the financing side, we supported exports of $2.1 billion, and that represented an increase of approximately 25% over the previous year. Again, a very healthy increase in support for the export sector. Breaking it out in terms of insurance, there was $6.6 billion in insurance last year, or a 32% increase over the previous year. And I think something that is quite significant in terms of Canadian exporter success is the fact that we increased the number of our small business clients by some 30% to 861 last year. And that's where we expect to see significant continued growth in the future. And in doing all of that, I told you that we provide insurance and we take risk. We paid out some claims. We paid out approximately $18.8 million in claims to Canadian companies, Canadian exporters who had insurance policies with the EDC. But in spite of all that, we realized an operating profit of $45 million last year, which was the highest in our corporate history, and we think is quite significant in terms of our ability to continue to meet the challenges of the global marketplace and to continue to assist Canadian exporters realize their opportunities abroad. The perspective of 1992 was also significant in the face of the recession. I had scratched in here, is over, was over. I don't know what to say. I think the jury's probably still out on that one. It depends upon your perspective and where you are. But at least, again, looking at the export sector, and if we're looking at opportunities, and we heard a lot of people this morning and this afternoon talk about realizing opportunities to add value, to redirect the economy, to make a change, certainly there are opportunities in the export sector to do so, in spite of our own recessionary problems here at home. We are determined as a company or as an export credit agency to continue to have our capital base increase so we can provide our customers with even better financial products to serve their requirements in the export markets. And we want to be more flexible and innovative in providing this support. We know that today's changing trading environment demands new and innovative approaches, and that just doesn't mean the exporters, that means EDC. One of the ways that we're working to improve our position, and Lee and I were talking about this earlier, and I think Lee will have some comments to make on his own particular experience with his company in a minute, so I won't take that away. But even EDC, as a Crown Corporation, we have embraced a total quality management program and a customer satisfaction initiative, and we're moving into the third year of that program, and we're very pleased and excited with what we've been able to do with that program. If we look at what it has enabled us to do, and we believe it's critical in our ability to meet the new demands of the export sector, at least measured in one form by business volume per employee, we've realized over 200% increase over the past 5 years, up to $18.6 million an employee. Quite a significant improvement. In these days of increasing interest in Canada's export performance, there is concern in quarters about Canadians' ability to win in international marketplaces. But we believe that on the basis of what we've seen at EDC, that as Canadians we have what it takes to maintain and expand our share of export markets. Success in business demands the same preparation, planning, hard work, and venturesome spirit that Canadian athletes adopt when they compete internationally abroad. And it's been clearly demonstrated that Canadian athletes can win gold in Olympic competition through proper application of these principles. And we believe in the same way Canadian exporters can win gold in international trade. EDC is prepared to play its full part in providing Canada's exporters with financial and insurance services that are as competitive as any in the world. Thank you very much for your attention today.
Good afternoon. What I'm going to do this afternoon is give you some history about my company, explain some of the problems that we have encountered over the last decade, how we've resolved those issues. In the process, we've added value to our company and leveraged our intellectual capital via the process of strategic alliances, and I hope to go into that at some length. Instamar Limited is a 20-person applied engineering company that specializes in the development of contact and close proximity sensor systems. Our systems go from the simple application of just detecting the onset of freezing precipitation to the more complex instrument, which is our about-to-be publicly announced clean wing detection system. In addition, we've developed sensors for the United States Aerospace Program. We've done simulation work for the Canadian Space Agency and worked on the new generation of the Canada arm, which is called a Special Purpose Remote Manipulator System. So that all sounds well and good, but how does it relate to value-added activities? Well, of course, we've discovered that we can leverage our individual intellectual capital here by forming joint ventures, strategic alliances, partnerships, teaming arrangements, and signing memorandums of understanding. In another application, Martin Luther King Jr. said, quote, "Our loyalties must transcend our race, our tribe, our class, and our nation. And this means we must develop a world perspective. No individual can live alone, no nation can live alone, and as long as we try, the more we are going to have war in this world. Now the judgment of God is upon us, and we must learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or we're all going to perish together as fools." Unquote. Business is war. Economic war, and it's conducted by nations, conglomerates, cartels, any other predatory type entity. Survival for the smaller companies such as ours requires alliances, just as in any other war. By stretching our business alliances farther and farther, we can improve our chances of winning in that war. At Instamar, we've decided to go to war in the aviation and aerospace industries. When we made that decision several years ago, we, since then, have had to deal with the end of the Cold War, shrinking defense budgets, the recession, deregulation of the aviation industry and the resultant chaos, and then all of the problems that go along with doing business in Newfoundland, such as distance from all the clients, small size, official skepticism that we have an IQ above 12, and lack of confidence. Our biggest problem, personally, is that comment. We really do lack confidence to go out and enter that fray. Given such threats to our existence, what have we done to try to overcome these problems? We've embarked on a vigorous program of productivity and in particular have increased our emphasis on our total quality program. We're striving to eliminate any redundancies, improve efficiency, and reduce waste. We're breaking down communications barriers within the company and promoted a team approach to all of our corporate operations. Long gone are my wonderful days as dictator, benevolent or otherwise. We have implemented corporate wellness programs. We've emphasized special preventative mental and physical health programs to go along with our enhanced benefits programs. Social interaction amongst our families is also a part of this well-rounded program. We have always listened to our customer and made him our main concern, but it is definitely now customer first. We're committed to a policy of continuous improvement that recognizes that the journey is the goal and that the process is continuous and never-ending. So we believe we've done our bit in becoming what we want to be and what we believe the world wants us to be. But how are we going to let the world know? We create new products in response to market need. How do we define that market and that market's needs, and how do we get to distribute our products into that market? In the mid-1980s, we had decided that the market we wished to approach was the world. We were well and truly into globalization a long time ago. Certainly we realized that we would only go for certain product segments we had specialized knowledge in, such as optical systems, but there was no reason that we couldn't establish a sales force and conquer the world, since we believed we had demonstrably superior products. The lesson we learned was that the world is full of products, either good, bad, or indifferent, and there is always too much product for too little market. We even discovered that some well-organized, large sales forces don't tell the total truth about their products and even manage to sell them regardless. Another lesson we then learned was to try to go the international distributor route. I believe this may be a good route for a lot of people. It wasn't for us. We believed that the products had to be better than the ones we were distributing. Because by now, or by then, we were learning a bit about market pull and about how everyone has a different idea about what the product should do and what it should be, including its color, its size, its weight. And if you couldn't turn around and meet what the client wanted, then you would have to rework your own system because someone else was able to meet the particular customer quirk that was being demonstrated. Feedback from our distributors sometimes became so diverse that we didn't really think we were all talking about the same systems that we were selling. I mean, why would they expect the system to do that? It's never designed to do that. That didn't matter. The distributor wanted it to do that because the client said so. So we went through a time of retrenchment, as the phrase goes. We, quote, regrouped and consolidated our facilities and downsized our workforce, unquote. In other words, we hit the wall running. There was little wrong with our products, but there was a lot wrong with our approach. We were not going to penetrate markets with what we were doing, and on top of that, competition was increasing, so we had to do more than adopt improved efficiencies. We had to find some new products, and we had to have new methods of market access. This became a twin-barreled approach in the company as we tried to find the appropriate new products and the new way for market access. I don't think anything that we did has not been written about by somebody somewhere, but having lived through the process, I feel ownership of it, and I'm comfortable relating to you today some distillation of all of those diverse theories. Winning at New Products is a seminar taught by Dr. Robert Cooper from McMaster and was brought to Newfoundland several years ago by the Canadian Centre for Marine Communications. It taught us all about the gateway system of product selection, and it reduces your chance of failure from approximately 90% for the neophyte to around 30% for the sophisticate who's done the seminar and read the books. And that's quite true, because new products entering the marketplace fail dramatically all the time. And it's as much an art as it is a science. However, you can improve your chances. In descending order of importance, the gateway system's to do with developing a product that is superior to competing products and meeting customers' needs, is of higher quality than competing products, reduces customers' costs, has unique features for the customer, does a unique task for the customer, or is a highly innovative product new to market. Notice that the highly innovative product new to market comes dead last in the success categories. This was a great shock to us since we were in the highly innovative business. Anyway, using his guidelines, we narrowed our focus on a product that we had under development which was designed to detect the presence of ice on the wings of aircraft. We'd been doing research into the detection of substances in layers for some time. In addition, we were also working on the non-intrusive methods of measuring ice thickness. That may sound easy, but it's infinitely complex when you realize that ice does not form like an ice cube with a definitive separation between ice and water. There is ice on the top, and there is water on the bottom, and various stages and degrees of slush in between. And when you're trying to give a definitive measurement of how thick is that ice, all of a sudden you get into a realm of impossibility. As we were doing this, different branches of research, there was the Arrow air crash in Gander. This was alleged to have been caused by ice on the wings, which reduced the lift and caused the loss of several hundred lives. We felt at that time we could develop a sensor to warn pilots about ice buildup, and were fortunate enough to be able to convince both the Federal Departments of Transportation and Defense, together with the National Research Council, to fund the development and testing of prototypes of this type of sensor. During the development work, there was another Canadian airplane crash with loss of lives in Dryden, Ontario, also caused by ice on the wings. To cut a long story off, the sensor was not only successful at detecting ice, but it could also detect snow. And it appeared to be easily able to detect other potential substances on the wings, such as de- and anti-icing fluids, and on top of that, could probably detect those substances in layers and tell the thickness of the layers. Then, just as this was all being discovered last year, another plane crash in New York with loss of life, again due to ice and snow on the wings of the plane at takeoff. We now had significant market pull for a product, but what specific product the market wanted we still didn't know. However, there was no question that we were exercising our main skill, innovation, and now we had to solve the second part of our puzzle. Throughout the product development phase, we were investigating the other part of this tale, which is the new method of market access for us. This is the part about leveraging our intellectual capital, and it's why I'm here, so I hope you're awake still. We started in the late 80s with the concept of let's be friends. Now, this is more formally stated as the Memorandum of Understanding. The MOU basically says that the prime contractor will go out and bid a job and include your skills as part of the backup documentation. After the award, you negotiate a contract. And this has some benefits in that it at least gets you to the agree-to-agree phase of a relationship. The two signatories agree that they wish to move in a common direction towards a common goal. We've signed about 8 of these so far. Under one, a significant contract was acquired, and we received a large subcontract after very intense negotiations. Under 2 others, some work was acquired, but after virtually no negotiations at all, we were cut out of the rewards completely. Under the remaining 5, no work has been acquired to date, only bidding expenses. The problem with memorandums of understanding is that they are absolutely non-binding, and if you are in a David and Goliath relationship, and Goliath decides that he's used your name but doesn't need to use your services, then I'm sorry, but David's slingshot is defective in that instance. The next type of relationship is the teaming arrangement. And this is an improvement we find because each member of the team bids his own section of the work, and the prime contractor integrates the bids and submits the whole. The intention is for the sum of the parts to be greater than the whole. It usually also adds regional distribution, which is key in Canadian government bids. After awards, the contracts always change in scope and size, just as the nature of business is, but at least such things as the scope of work that you individually are performing and your charge-out rates are already agreed, and it's virtually impossible for the prime contractor to cut out the sub. Unfortunately, the cost of doing these fixed-price bids is very high, and with success rates in the 35% range, pursuing this work can be devastating if you have a bad year. You're talking $30,000 to $50,000 for a firm of our size to prepare one of these bids. It gets extremely expensive. We've done 3 of these so far and have met with and teamed with some really credible partners with whom we've been very pleased. However, we spend even more money on these bids than on MOUs and haven't received any contracts yet. It does get your name bandied about in high places, however. We've also formed several joint ventures. These are usually agreements to pursue product-specific areas of growth. Most joint ventures specify the target market and will frequently set sales targets. Our experience has been for joint ventures to relate mainly to technology transfer from a foreign national to ourselves to compete in a specified work target. We've mainly used these in pursuit of Hibernia-related work. The appropriate North Sea company, say, wants Hibernia work without establishing a Newfoundland office. The intention upon acquisition of a contract in the specified areas for our company to be trained in the technology, handle the installation and commissioning under supervision, and then be the local support office for the duration of the project. I've seen numerous of these, and some have the major partner providing financial support during the bid phase, some provide interim training, and some leave you totally alone until the bid document is finished. We've had limited success with these, but we are very pleased with them in general. The partner that you pick has to be the key man in the market area. The market area has to be thoroughly reviewed for product fit with your existing business plan. Financially and technically, they can be very rewarding. However, the most successful level of leveraging that we have used is the strategic alliance. This has several versions that go from enhanced teaming agreements to what I call full marriage arrangements with the appropriate exchanges of equity. This becomes much more formal, and this is really when you start to see the lawyers appear. The simplest form is an advanced form of the MOU, but the commitment to each other becomes more formal, even though it's still non-binding. Generally, the 2 of you agree precisely what you intend to do together, and within reason how you intend to do it. Goals and timetables are set and measurements established. It's a real framework within which to work, and usually has the larger partner finding the work and the smaller one performing defined subcontracts, and in some way adding value to the prime contractor. In one of these that we've signed at that level, we will become qualified manufacturers of small batches of space hardware. Our larger partner does not manufacture in small specialty type batches, so he establishes in us a low-cost qualified supplier on whom he can depend for best rate, best timetable service. The only problem that really arises here is the commitment of the larger partner to feed the smaller one. It is frequently a one-way street with great reliance on the goodwill of the larger partner. The last step we have taken is to go to a full but non-equity strategic alliance with the Canadian division of a major multinational avionics manufacturer. This is almost marriage. This is a mutual 2-way agreement that involves a lot more lawyers and should lead to a lot more rewards for both parties, outside of any requirement to merely act as a subcontractor or to satisfy regional industrial benefits policies. The CEO of our partner is about to give a speech on February 18th outlining some of his perceptions of what this deal means to them. I'm going to take the next several minutes and paraphrase part of his presentation so you can understand their feelings on the subject. It was certainly very enlightening to me. The official announcement of this particular deal that we have struck is not until February 16th. So I'm going to have to refer to them as Company X. However, they are the 1,000-person strong Canadian unit of a 100,000-person strong multinational with gross sales of $12 billion. So we are definitely dealing with someone who's quite serious. And this is now an outtake from this person's speech. And he is going to be, when he gives this, talking about us. Quote, "I want to tell you about a very exciting new product being developed here in Canada for the world aerospace market. The way in which we became involved in this program and the nature of the business alliance which has been put in place to carry it through are, we believe, particularly creative. Strategic business arrangements are not new to us at Company X. We have a long history of innovative and productive agreements with major suppliers of components, subsystems, and services. We have also seized upon opportunities to expand our technology base through technology transfer arrangements of several types, which are typical of those described in the many private and government publications on the subject. One particular product improvement project also includes elements of new technology which have been invented within our own company, and it would be incorrect to give you the impression that we do not have an excellent research and development capability of our own. Included in our family of companies are several research and technology centers where pure and applied research is carried out to support our corporation's technology base in aerospace, automotive, and engineered materials. Nonetheless, even a corporate giant can no longer afford to carry out long-term, pure research projects with no apparent application in the internal strategic plan. The December 1991 issue of Scientific American carried a report on the fundamental redirection of the nature and purpose of research at AT&T's Bell Laboratories in New Jersey. They've been challenged to create a new model for corporate research, one which includes a strong emphasis on applied research in support of business groups. What applies to the epitome of U.S. industrial research certainly applies to us at Company X. It would be folly to assume that all the elements of technology which might be brought to bear to help us in our struggle for excellence would be captured by our own internal research and development programs. For this reason, we've begun to look for innovative ways of developing new products quickly, and I wish to describe for you one that is particularly exciting to us as it promises to be an outstanding Canadian success. He then goes on to describe the clean wing detection system, Instamar, the history of how we came together and whatever. Then back to his speech. Again, however, it's a great speech. I love it. Made today easy. Again, however, Instamar realized that they knew, this is when we just met after we'd given a speech at the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astronautics. We had actually invented the better mousetrap, and we relaxed and sat back and waited for the world to come to our door. We figured, aha, we've got this sensor, this is marvelous, this is terrific, here comes the world, we'll line them up over here, they'll start to bid, we'll make billions. No, it doesn't work that way at all. We had to then, having built the better mousetrap, go out and find the partner. I mean, he didn't want to come at all. Nobody wanted to come, so we had to go give papers, go to shows, wave our arms, meet a lot of people, etc., etc. So we went to this show and caused some excitement in the aviation industry. Then back to his speech. Again, however, Instamar realized that they knew very little about the design, production, and certification of aircraft systems. Further, they realized that the production of a commercially successful instrument, which was fully certified for flight, would require resources well in excess of those which they had available. With support from the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency, they approached us at Company X with their idea. After over a year of evaluation, investigation, market research, and business planning, we are now proceeding aggressively with a joint program development in which the two companies will combine resources to bring the clean wing detection system to market. What is different about the arrangements which have been put in place between these two companies? Let me observe that conventional technology acquisition agreements are essentially one way. A company which has developed, perhaps in rudimentary form, a technology, an application, or a product, agrees to provide that technology under license for use by another company. The receiving company provides specifications, design parameters, and guidance, and incorporates the licensed technology into products which are then sold. It is left to the receiving company to do the actual marketing of the end products. The present relationship has been carefully structured to work both ways. It was realized that at Company X we have access to markets, a well-established reputation in the aviation industry, a highly effective worldwide sales organization, a superb, round-the-clock, worldwide customer support capability, an established capability for design, build, test, and certification of aerospace products, and many years of experience in providing complex systems to the industry. Instamar, while lacking this experience and set of capabilities, has a much higher ratio of engineers and scientists to support staff and a degree of flexibility and adaptability which is rarely found in large companies. Furthermore, Instamar had already made important gains in leveraging their intellectual capital through a variety of relationships with universities, government research labs, and various agencies which sponsor and encourage entrepreneurial activities at a national or regional level. It was realized that the small company could, to some extent, take the place of the research laboratory skunkworks, and that we would otherwise maintain ourselves. Thus, the first agreement signed between our two companies was not a license or technology transfer agreement. It was, in fact, a strategic alliance agreement in which the two companies agreed to work together to design, build, and market instrumentation and sensing systems for the world aerospace market. There was no explicit mention of the clean wing detection system or the licensing of the technology which eventually would be used in that system. The strategic alliance agreement turns out to have some interesting properties. For one thing, either company can identify a market opportunity. It sometimes happens that a small company finds a market opportunity by virtue of its location and its own technology network. Regionalism is a fact in our country, and small companies in economically disadvantaged regions are actively encouraged to bid for contracts. However, often the small company cannot successfully compete for such contracts, lacking the experience, facilities, skills, and financing to perform the work. The Strategic Alliance Agreement contains provisions which establish the parameters by which we at Company X can support Instamar in such a bid. In this case, Instamar assumes the responsibility of prime contractor, while Company X becomes the major subcontractor. The smaller company identifies the scope of the work which they're able to perform and subcontracts the rest. In carrying out the work, the two companies combine resources to their mutual benefit. As a byproduct of this arrangement, the small company acquires an invaluable hands-on introduction to the aerospace business, enabling it to compete more successfully for additional contracts. Another feature of the Strategic Alliance Agreement is that it embodies the protection of intellectual property, which makes it possible for technical and scientific staff of the two companies to exchange information freely. It also enacts business arrangements which provide a vehicle for transferring funding for technical investigations without the necessity of a formal quotation process. This ensures that the intellectual resources of the two companies can be combined quickly and effectively to investigate the technological implications of a new market opportunity. This mechanism has already been exercised to identify key technologies for new product development in advanced sensing and instrumentation systems for the space market. The Strategic Alliance Agreement then provides the overall umbrella under which specific tasks can be implemented. In the case of the clean wing detection system, that implementation is embodied in a joint development and license agreement. The development program is structured in the conventional way using both internal and external funding. Company X has the lead role and will perform about 70% of the design and development work, and Instamar will carry out under subcontract distinct portions of the design and development. Both companies will participate in all of these activities in order to maximize the intellectual talent applied to the considerable challenges of the clean wing detection system development program. In other instances, specific tasks generated by either company are implemented under separate purchase orders, each with its own subset of specifications. It is evident, goes on the president of Company X, that the structure of such an agreement must be crafted with some care. An inordinate amount of respect and trust is required on both parts. Our company's staff outnumber theirs by a factor of about 50, and our respective annual sales reflect the same ratio. It would be very easy for us to inadvertently injure them, and it is therefore very important that good and clear channels of communication are established and used regularly. Key personnel in both companies must get to know each other and must learn to listen to and respect each other's thoughts and ideas. Nevertheless, the rewards can be considerable. In the context of this discussion on leveraging intellectual capital, it is especially interesting to note that the Strategic Alliance Agreement, which I have described, has effectively doubled the number of senior scientific and technical staff which we can put to work on new product development at Company X, and has done so at virtually no cost to our company. I think you'll agree that represents a good return on the effort which went into establishing the agreement, end quote. So you can see that they think pretty highly of this. I didn't write that for them. Should have. But they're approaching this in an extremely positive fashion, and with the distinct capabilities of both firms, we believe we're going to have a very productive future. I would like to stress in all of these arrangements, however, that it is key that the people make the deals work. You can have the most complex arrangement on earth, but if the individual people that are involved in it don't want to make it work, it won't work. So regardless of the complexity of the arrangements, it all comes down to the goodwill of the individuals. So I've tried in this talk to give you some idea of the range of value added that can result from various types of alliances. There is no doubt that the form of alliance that can add the most value to an enterprise depends on the enterprise itself. However, I will go back to my original quote from Dr. King and stress his philosophy that it is critical for us all to cooperate in order to be successful. Our search has left us better capable to do what we do best, which is to innovate. and to have those innovations incorporated into systems and distributed by professionals in those fields. Instamar discovered it could not go to war alone, but that it needed alliances. I will end now with a quotation from a famous scientific authority from the past, Lord Kelvin, on the subject of innovation. Heavier than air flying machines are impossible. Thank you.
Thank Mr. Shinkle for sharing his experiences with us. And now I open the floor to questions to be addressed to either gentleman. Remember that if you don't want to ask your question, there will be runners picking up forms. Are there any questions to either gentleman?
This question is addressed to Mr. Shinkle. In your opinion, does government regulation help you as a company or hinder you in operating in Newfoundland, especially producing value-added products?
Government regulation can help and it can hinder. And again, it's very much like the talk at lunch. The regulations have to be reviewed. I believe that government has an obligation to set the framework within which business should be operating, and that includes a regulatory framework.
Hi, I have a question for Stephen Dempsey. In Peter Green's luncheon address, he told us about the Kitchener manufacturer, even though hypothetical, but he said how the manufacturer was content to take their own little market. I'm just wondering, what does the EDC do to encourage local manufacturers to export?
Well, Lisa, there are a number of well-organized initiatives by sort of trade team, which is made up of the Export Development Corporation, International Trade Center here with the ISTC people, and COLA as well as provincial trade reps, to provide basic knowledge and infrastructure development to sort of pre-export companies, give them the skill sets they need to analyze the risks and opportunities in the export marketplace. And then when they're ready to export and have particular contracts to consider, then we have a broad range of insurance and financing services that in effect minimize the risk in terms of payment for them, and in some instances, in effect, those risks are less than they would be trying to do the same transaction in the domestic market.
I have a question for Mr. Shinkle. I was wondering, what are the benefits of producing and developing value-added and high-tech products in Newfoundland, and do they outweigh any negative aspects?
Well, one of the advantages that we find here is lifestyle and approach. We consider the lifestyle and approach here to be excellent. There is considerable government assistance available for your marketing activities, which helps to defray the cost sometimes of being so far away from the marketplace. We have here an extremely large pool of extremely intelligent people just waiting to be put to work. And it's certainly one of the great unique advantages is the actual infrastructure that is present at Memorial, at the Institute of Marine Dynamics, the Marine Institute, Secor. It just goes on forever. We have tremendous facilities available, extremely highly trained people to work in them. The disadvantages that we have here, I've mentioned certainly distance from the marketplace, which is, you can overcome it, but it just means marketing, 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 marketing. I've got great air miles, I can tell you. Its size, unfortunately, our companies, the individual private entrepreneurial companies themselves, are not very big. There is a lack of venture capital here, private venture capital, which it holds companies back a great deal. And the principal problem we face is our lack of confidence. We honestly don't believe we can compete in the world environment. And because we don't believe it, we don't try it. We certainly went out into the aerospace market, particularly the United States program on the Space Station Freedom, with incredible trepidations. I mean, we honestly did not believe that we could compete in that marketplace because, you know, we're just stupid Newfoundlanders. The first thing we competed on, we won. That first thing that we competed on and won, they doubled the order when we went through preliminary design review because they thought we'd come up with such a unique solution. We found out they have all the same problems we do. They watch all the same TV shows. They eat the same food. They put their pants on one leg at a time, all those things. So really, we just need to get the confidence to go out and compete because we can do it here. So there are disadvantages, there are advantages. To date, for our company, the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages, and we certainly hope to continue to grow and prosper in this environment.
It is the Dean of the Faculty of Business Administration at Memorial University, Dr. Rick Roston. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Roston.
That was a good introduction. I think it's Dr. Risk Roston. I keep changing this speech here, much to Lenita Carter's great fears. I have a prepared speech, and I've got a piece of paper with a bunch of penciled remarks. Before I get into those, let me just say I'm delighted to address the 28th Annual Business Day presented by Commerce students. They put the Dean on last as a punishment here, I guess not quite last, penultimate, I suppose. And to say hello to everybody here, and to thank the presenters, to thank the students, and to welcome, I believe, 4 students from Dalhousie. A couple of comments here about some of the speakers. Peter Green, earlier today, I think he came up with the ultimate oxymoron, competitive government. I thought that was a good one. If Doug Hawkins was here, I could have told him what to do about the pump. The only pump house I know is the kind you drink from. You know, I've been to a lot of pump houses like that. You have to turn the mic down there. Is there a message there? Okay. He should have forgotten about the pump. I got the way to solve his problem and sell his cottage. You don't have to picture a pump in Stephen, you graduated from the wrong schools, I guess, so I can't really help you help the students. They have to help themselves. Isn't that what this theme is about here today? Lee Shinkle, the ultimate, I thought, in entrepreneurship. He used somebody else's speech. That's pretty good, I think, you know. Now, there is this question about whether being entrepreneurial means you have to get out and start a business. It seems to me, I think, that you can be enterprising. You don't have to go out and start your own business. That's okay. And there was some talk about opening up Eastern Europe. And I saw this program on Eastern Europe, and I thought I saw the ultimate, I think, in enterprising spirit. They showed this little table, and on it were some burned out light bulbs in Russia in a marketplace. Now, why do you think, speaking of added value, burned out light bulbs would have any value in a marketplace? I don't know. I thought maybe you cut the top off and use it as a vase or vase. I came up with all these great ideas. They interviewed the person selling the burned out light bulbs, and this ties everything together, I think. The guy from IBM wanted greater wattage in his lights, I think. We talked about the growth in entrepreneurship in Eastern Europe. Well, the value here was you buy the burned out light bulb, you go back to where you work in Russia, you unscrew the good light bulb, you put in the burned out light bulb, and you take the good light bulb home. That, to me, I thought was quite enterprising. I was going to tell some jokes here at this time of the day, but Lenita Carter, again, she kind of vets stuff that I say, and any kind of joke I could come up with was ageist, sexist, or racist, or a Newfoundland joke, then that includes all categories, I guess. So I could only think of a cartoon that I saw in the past that kind of encapsulated a lot of things that we're talking about. It was a Dennis the Menace cartoon. And Dennis was selling lemonade. It said, lemonade, 5 cents a glass. And attached to the lemonade stand was a sign. It said, lemonade sales, $10, expenses $5, profit $5, better than IBM, General Motors, and Sears. But I digress. Let me get to the kernel of wisdom here that I'm going to put forward. I'd like you to take out your pen and pencils. I'm going to test you on this later, okay? I'm trying to practice. I'm down in the firing line in a few months here. Hasdeen 93, I call it. That's June 30th. Anyway, I'd like to begin my talk by suggesting that there's one thing in life that you can never have taken away from you, and that's your intellect and your natural curiosity. Given that the half-life of information is decreasing almost exponentially, and given the importance of being able to react to future events, nothing is more critical today than one's ability to learn. There is in the popular management literature today an emphasis on so-called learning organizations. Organizations, of course, do not exist without people, and therefore those within organizations have to be the foundation of their success, and this means that people within a so-called learning organization must learn how to learn. They must strive to do better if the organization is going to be effective, and a number of people have said that over the day. What I'm saying essentially is the most important way in which to add value to Canada's economy is to add value to individuals during their educational experience. And Bill Party was talking about that earlier. And this is a lifetime effort. Whether we're talking about formal education or informal education, whether we're talking about kindergarten, high school, or post-secondary education, there can be no better investment in Canada's future than in helping its people learn how to learn, to be curious, to be innovative, although Lee Shinkle has said that's last on the list. But anyway, we just got to figure out how to sell the better mousetrap, I guess, and always to try to do better than you did before. This is not as easy as it first appears. Learning is not something that you can sort of taste, touch, and feel very often. It's not short-term, but rather long-term. And we know, notwithstanding what everybody says here, corporations are interested in at least a short-term return along with a long-term return, or if you don't have a short-term return.
Congratulate her on the success of the 28th Annual Business Day. Without her patience and guidance, today would not have been possible. Please give a warm welcome to Miss Catherine Parsons.
Thank you, Cavell. I, unlike Dr. Roskin, am going to keep my speech to about 2 minutes. Each year, the graduating class at Memorial's Faculty of Business develops a theme that they feel is timely in the business environment today. This year's theme, Adding Value, Redirecting Canada's Economy, clearly fits this description. It is on that basis that the annual Business Day Conference is organized. This year, we have heard a wide variety of speakers express their opinions on how Canada must restructure itself economically for the future. These views, I'm sure you'll agree, were not only interesting and informative, but thought-provoking. From our discussion, many possible courses of action have been presented regarding how we, the business community in Newfoundland, can begin to add value and redirect Newfoundland's and ultimately Canada's economy. Times have changed. It is necessary for each and every one of us to adapt to this highly rigorous metamorphosis. Newfoundland is full of potential which can be fulfilled, and we are the people to do it. I would also like to take this opportunity to direct you to the acknowledgement section of your brochure. Without the help of these businesses and individuals, the conference would not have been possible. Further to that list are Thrifty Car Rental, Hickman Motors, and Breakwater Books. We thank them all for their contribution. Furthermore, Peters Productions is having complimentary calendars just outside the door there for all of you who are interested. so you can pick one up as you're leaving. And finally, in closing, I would like to thank the Business Day Committee for their tremendous effort, support, and dedication over the past 8 months. Collectively, it is they who have made the 28th Annual Business Day a success. Thank you all for coming. I hope you've had a great day.